The purpose of me making this video for the court to see is so all parties can understand the flow of my presentation and the direction the evidence takes the case. So I'm going to talk through the complaint. This time, if you can, please start the PowerPoint presentation that's also going to be on the disc so that you can follow along with this video in case there's something you need to pause and look at more in-depthly. First up, we have the complaint itself. I feel like it needs a little bit of explanation because it may seem too vague or not easily understood. So here we have the letterhead. Myself versus the state of Michigan, and according to the civil rules procedure, you're supposed to direct it towards the governor or the head of the agency that you are suing. Okay, in this I state that the cause is state of Michigan forcing me to serve involuntarily, and by that I mean it's trying to force me to be a party to its system, either by citizen or just declaring that it has personal jurisdiction in some way, shape, or form. They can't do this against, say, Native Americans or foreign diplomats. For the most part, tourists. There has to be some sort of agreement to the laws and everything in order for them to be applied and gain personal jurisdiction. So that's the main crux of this, and you can take your time and read this if you would like. I gotta get through this video fast, so I'm claiming Fifth Amendment is being violated for takings clause, 13th for the involuntary serving. I'm not trying to be a citizen of the state of Michigan, nor do I interact with it, so stop trying to force me. 14th Amendment for two reasons. One, for jurisdiction and its definition on what a citizen is, and for two, it's a repeat of the takings clause as well. And subsections 241, 242, and 876 of Title 18, which are posted on the sides here, are merely to show that even though this is considered a crime if it was a person doing it against person, but since it's the government that I believe is acting the same way, I feel it's very important to expose and just show the severity of the problem. So you can take your time and look those over. Jurisdiction and venue. I gave the court the authority. Well, I'm suggesting the court has authority through 1331 federal jurisdiction because I'm challenging it on U.S. constitutional principles. 1337 for commerce and antitrust regulations because this stems from a conversation I had with local officials stating that the state of Michigan owns all the land and the property that's built onto it, and we are just renting it, and that in essence is feudalism. So this is also jurisdiction in the fact that they are monopolizing the entire land and not letting anybody else own it. Conspiracy to interfere with civil rights with elective franchise. That was for me not being able to perform my duties as a NCO or non-commissioned officer in the United States Army Reserves within Michigan, because I need to have somewhere to live and I have the right to own property, but they're not allowing me to own property. Removal of civil actions, and for 1441, 1443, was my attempt to remove the Ingham County tax action against me, property tax action, into federal court so I could challenge it under U.S. constitutional law, which was not being granted to me in the Ingham County courts. The claim, just description of me, where I came from. You can take your time to read it if you want. Basically saying how I didn't realize I was entering into a government contract with the state of Michigan when I got my driver's license, and what all that further entailed. And a lot of us fall into the same problem, but I'm bringing it to a head and addressing it. I talk about how I entered my federal service. I lived in different areas, and just more background history on me and why it's important that I feel I need to do this. This also explains how I took over, quote-unquote, ownership of this house when my dad passed away. It became an inheritance to me, but we did a warranty deed between my mother and I, and she went and got her own place, so I took over this property, and we signed the deed over and mentioning the date. I compared the property tax bill 2016 winter season with another soldier of mine down at Fort Custer, which is here in Michigan, and it was substantially different, and I explained that in this. Please take your time to read it. And that's what made me grow concern and look into the law and everything that basically empowers the property tax here in the state of Michigan. So I went to the Ingham County Register of Deeds, did my own search. I found every transfer from the beginning, from the state of Michigan all the way to myself, so I have that later on in this presentation. When I mentioned that I found the last one on the Bureau of Land Management website, I actually didn't find it there. I was confused at that time because the person I was looking for was on there, but the property did not match up. But I do have all the titles now. And through my research, I found out that even having all those still wasn't the full title or understanding of what a title is. It's just a title abstract. So you also have to understand things even like liens that'll also be explained in this presentation. I interviewed multiple attorneys. Their recordings are in here in the presentation, and concluded that this appeared more like a legal trust than a ownership of an actual property. So I decided this was too much to try to bear and started working my way out of state of Michigan's jurisdiction so that I could once again own my home and land. And I've made those steps. I'm proving it in this presentation, and explaining how I separated myself legally from the state of Michigan. I had a previous case in the Ingham County Court through Delhi Township was prosecuting me on a civil ordinance infraction. The case numbers here, the documents are also in this presentation to show that I won that case based on them not being able to prove that they have personal jurisdiction over me. So if they didn't have it then, why do they have it now to tax me? Well, it's because later I found out they use a different type of jurisdiction to prosecute, which helps curtail your right to constitutional rights to own property. I emailed the county commissioner about the issue, and she forwarded it to Eric Schertzing, the county treasurer, and I have conversations between those in this presentation as well. Please read all this. I'm just trying to paraphrase and summarize it real quick. So what I foresee as a resolution to this problem is that I needed to have a jury because the amount that I'm trying to get back is to fix this situation. And I don't necessarily have full right to just say, well, it needs to be my way. So it needs to go through a court tribunal, and it needs to be heard by a jury, peers in my community, to decide whether this action should happen or not. And that will be explained further on. What I'm recommending the court to do is to award me injunctive relief through specific performance, and that's to have the court judicially recognize that I am the true lawful landowner of the land that Ingham County is trying to assume ownership of, and that the state of Michigan should award me $1 million so that I have a 5-year plan to get things back to where the residents here have the title back to their property, instead of having it held against them and a lien in perpetuity, so that they'll never own their property and always be held ransom against them. And this in addition section is just to let you know that I'm not part of any organization nefarious. I don't have any ill intentions. I faithfully served this country for 17 years, and I'm just trying to help my local community get back the very rights that I fought for them. And now here I am fighting for them again and not getting paid for it. So alright, next we have this slide. It's basically for the jury. I'm sure I don't need to remind any parties of this case about the constitutional amendments, but this is to help inform the jury who might not remember from their schooling and might need a little refresher real quick. It won't take long. Alright, so here we have from the Government Publishing Office, and kind of an extrapolation of the 14th Amendment explanation. And just a brief reading of the actual amendment itself. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. So you have to subject there is not a noun. It's not saying the person is a subject. Subject is used here as a verb. So, and subject, the subject is the verb to the jurisdiction thereof. So, does the person subject to the United States? Does the person subject to the individual state or one of the several states? And also, when we say reside here, are we talking physically or are we talking legally? Because that is a difference as well. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. So right there you have kind of a clause from Article 4, Section 2 put in, where the rights of a citizen of one state also protects any citizens traveling from out of state into that state. But you only get the rights of that state that you're in. You don't get to keep, if you're going from Michigan to Ohio and you're entering into their jurisdiction, you do something that causes a legal problem, you're only going to get the protection of that state's constitution and the United States Constitution. You don't get to carry your state's constitution with you everywhere you go. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So what does that mean, due process? Does that include jurisdiction? In order to get full due process protections of the United States Constitution, wouldn't you need to be processed in personam jurisdiction so that you are being tried and you can use your constitutional rights of the due process to protect yourself? Nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. Again, that's a part of that Article 4, Section 2. You're a citizen of the several states. You're not a citizen of a single state. And that'll be explained here in a little bit. Carrying on. I kind of missed it. I'm going to have to go back. Bear with me here. In the explanation of this, they talk a lot about a national citizenship. Now, when the slaves are freed, they had to, they say create a national citizenship, which I don't agree with, but it does define more that there is two citizenships, because the newly freed slaves didn't have a state to have their rights protected. They were just, they actually became sovereign when they were freed from the 13th Amendment. So they now became a sovereign inhabitant of the United States, and in order for our laws to protect them, there had to be a defining thing that just because they don't belong to a specific state, they still have the protections of the United States as United States citizens. So they had a national citizenship. They didn't have a state citizenship until the states started allowing them and further amendments got pressed. So there are two types of citizenships that most people have in the United States: a national and a local state citizenship. Or, in conjunction, a several state citizenship, since you're protected by all the individual states as you travel through them. This talks about different cases with Dred Scott, Slaughterhouse. If you need a refresher, go ahead and pause and read it. But again, so the amendment can most responsibly be read in defining a citizenship which a citizen keeps unless he voluntarily relinquishes it. So, have I not stated to the court multiple times that I voluntarily relinquished my state citizenship? And even the inhabitants in Michigan, before it was a state government, had their national citizenship. They were U.S. citizens before they were citizens of the state of Michigan. So it's not a foreign concept. It's just not taught anymore. Privileges or immunities, aka constitutional rights, or whatever the state allows it. Since you contracted yourself into it, you have to abide by. I'm going to skip down to what I have blocked off. I had a couple sections highlighted, but I'm probably not going to go over them in court. Alright, right here. Although the extent of the rights protected by substantive due process may be controversial, which is any reason for the court to be able to hear something besides procedural due process would be considered substantive due process. Its theoretical basis is firmly established and forms the basis for much of modern constitutional case law. Passage of the Reconstruction Amendments 13th, 14th, and 15th gave the federal courts the authority to intervene when a state threatened fundamental rights of its citizens. And one of the most important, I'm going to actually deny that, because the federal government already had the right to intervene if the states weren't obeying the U.S. Constitution. There's a Federal Crimes Act, which was the first federal law put in before the U.S. Code, and that was brought in 1790, right after the U.S. Constitution was drafted and ratified. So there was already laws in place, and the U.S. Constitution itself says in Article 6 that anything that the states make in contradiction to the U.S. Constitution is notwithstanding. So if they make a law that violates a right that's protected by the U.S. Constitution, it has no effect. But that doesn't stop the law from getting drafted. It has to get challenged in court, as I am doing now. But I'm not actually challenging the law. I'm challenging the due process that I'm being denied. Alright, here we have personam jurisdiction. The Due Process Clause provides that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And that's the in personam. So how are you going to take my property and not use in personam jurisdiction? We're going to talk about that later, and what's really been transpiring. Jurisdiction, I know this is stuff every legal professional should know, but not a lot of people understand that. There's personal jurisdiction, which ties the laws to the individual, the person. That has to prove that person has to abide by those laws. So it's not blanket. You don't just walk into a jurisdiction and say, "Oh, our laws apply to you because we say so." There's got to be some type of voluntary contract between the individual and that government on some level. Territorial jurisdiction, this is also called venue. So the jurisdiction boundaries itself are the territorial jurisdiction. It doesn't mean that the laws apply to you. That's just the space it's allowed to operate in. Subject matter jurisdiction, this helps more point to what type of court that the problem should be, or if the subject matter itself is even a crime or a civil infraction of some sort. So what the action was is the subject matter. Next slide. Alright, so now here we have the property title transfer between my mother, who was the previous tenant of this parcel, and myself. We're going to explain how we got there. So below we have a map of the neighborhood, and this is where I currently live, in this blue section right here. This is the golf course. This is the elementary school two of my kids go to right now, and this is actually one neighborhood right here joining another neighborhood down here, but this is my parcel of land I'm supposed to own. This map was provided by Ingham County, their map making office that they have in the county courthouse. And up here we have my mother's, Karen Soroka, and my dad, who's passed, Patrick Soroka, their deed transfer, title transfer from the construction development corporation that made the neighborhood to them, because our house was one of the first ones built on this street. The street was all dirt when we moved in. There was only a couple houses in this section here, but primarily after right about here it was all woods. I used to play in the woods when I was younger. This road wasn't barely in construction yet. So right here is about the end of, right there, about the beginning of the woods. So we were one of the first houses on the block. A lot of the other houses were modeled after our design. I still have the blueprints for them, which I may bring to court and show. So here is the deed from them to my mom. That was done back in '93, registered. And from there, when it was time after my father passed, for my mom to transfer the deed to myself so she could go get a smaller place to live in, we paid Martin Newman and his law agency to do the title transfer. He suggested a warranty deed was what we needed for what we had requested of him, so that's what we did. And this is kind of a receipt of what was paid for his service. This is the tax form that he had my mother fill out, rescinding some tax exemption, and to kind of entice me into having that same exemption, had me sign it as well. And I didn't know. I don't think this necessarily puts the tax law onto the property. I think the deed itself does that. But this may show my acceptance of it, which I didn't have the knowledge I needed to even do this transfer, because I didn't know what I knew now. I signed it, and it's dated 27th, 2016. And then Martin Newman signed his portion, saying that the property transfer affidavit was done in accordance with his work. And then this is him sending it to the Delhi Township Assessment with affidavit and all those PRE paperworks. This is them receiving mine that I signed and the government official signing down here. Received and recorded on that date by the assessor's office. And then Martin Newman's affidavit also received. So now this is the new deed, and it is registered and recorded. And here's Eric's treasurer department, Eric Schertzing, the Ingham County treasurer, his stamp, signature, somebody's initials. And on the deed, I'm going to talk about these different parts, because these three words here I actually didn't know when I signed up, but I know now, and the definitions are on the next slide. But as you can see, we transferred for $1. We didn't want to use any money, but we were forced to when we did the transaction, almost like it had to be amount of monetary exchange when she just wanted to give me the property. So I believe now that with this one line right here, subject to existing building use restrictions, easements, or record zoning ordinances, if any, is the one line that reaffirms the state of Michigan, Ingham County's control over the property. And I'm not even sure that this deed would be accepted without this line. I don't think they would just easily relinquish their control. Or by just the registration process, does that mean that it enters law? These are questions that no professionals seem to give me the answer for, So we'll see what I found out, and we'll come to our conclusions. And this is the second page of that, just saying drafted by Martin, recorded by Martin. I didn't even take it to Ingham County to get it registered or recorded. He did all that. He made sure that happened. That was his action. Alright, so that is the title transfer. Now I'm going to call my mother, who was the previous tenant of the property, to the stand to ask her questions. These are the two terms on the deed that I needed some definition for, so I figured maybe somebody else would. I know tenement was I believe the other one, and tenement just means any structure you live in is where you have your tenancy. It's where you are tenant of, so it's a tenement. So an appurtenance is anything attached to the property. Could be a basketball hoop, could be, like they say here, a furnace, air conditioning unit. They mentioned down here in-ground swimming pools, anything that got attached to the land that's considered in one with the entire property parcel. It can't be moved. Hereditament is anything. There's corporeal and incorporeal, I believe. Yes. Basically different types of things that are inherent you get from an inheritance. You can read that if you want. But you guys probably already know this. I'm just trying to help clarify terms for the jury. So here we have two videos because I'm trying to figure out. I had caught wind that the title, the deed, doesn't have the same effect as, let's say, a certificate of title from your Secretary of State or DMV. So I wanted to know what type of title I had with the house, and I thought the deed was the title itself, but it's not. And here I have two videos. I forget this gentleman's name, but apparently he's the owner of this company. The YouTube hyperlinks are there. Anybody can go to him and check them out. He explains why the government doesn't actually do these title searches. This is something that is done on a private side, private organization. So I suggest everybody, I'm going to play these in court and have everybody listen to what they have to say. In this video specifically, this first one, he talks about what the deed actually is, what a title is, and then over here he explains what a title abstract is. Alright, now like I said before, we have the deed, which we were told was the title of the house, and we have down here a vehicle title or certificate of title, and they both seem to have different entitlements. So these are all my opinions in this gray block. This isn't something I pulled off of a website, so you can consider this part of my testimony. Deed is a legal action, and the document is a recording of that legal action, which is a conveyance. The conveyance is your permission or your rights and responsibilities of that property, of that object or whatever it is. The vehicle title is just a certificate certifying that the vehicle has an owner. So it says the word title in it. Certificate of title. So it kind of looks like a certificate. It's got the flashy border. There's a description of the property on top, and me, just me. There's no other party with the exception of the seal of the state of Michigan who performed this government action of creating this certificate. And on the flip side of it, you have your transfers and stuff from person to person, and that seems to be more like what goes on here, because you have multiple parties involved. The original deed doesn't contain the word title at all. So up here, you don't see the word title until it's up in the little Ingham County stamp, which is done after this document's created. And it says like trusts and titles are registered at the Ingham County Courthouse under that effect. The certificate contains only one person signifying a relationship to the equipment, right there. Both are legal instruments that get registered to the Secretary of State. This one gets registered to County Treasury. Or the Register of Deeds, which is pretty much attached to the Treasury. Once registered, the legal relationship with that property, aka title, becomes subject to the government it is registered to, and taxation may begin. So when this property is always going to be taxed, because whether this document got registered or not, the previous tenant was still going to get taxed. So the only thing you're actually registering is who's going to be the new tenant at that parcel. And that person's going to get charged taxation. So this document is only registering me into the state of Michigan, not the property. The property has always been there. Whether this document's created or not, it stays there. It didn't leave the state of Michigan's jurisdiction when we created this, as far as I know. And I didn't voluntarily put it back into the state of Michigan's jurisdiction. It was already there. So we're only registering in and out the property tax, the person who's going to be charged property tax. That's it. That's what's getting registered. Down here, the vehicle gets a license number. The equipment is being registered in. And the person as well, and they have to pay their annual fees as well and abide by the state of Michigan, really any of the several states' traffic code. One can leave a jurisdiction, the other cannot, even if not registered into another government. But will it still be recognized as legally owned? So this piece of equipment can be unregistered, as I have done, from the Secretary of State of the state of Michigan, but that doesn't render this document incapable of proving that I am the owner of that property. And this one, I'm sorry, you can leave the jurisdiction and you can not enter it back into a jurisdiction, or you can enter it into another jurisdiction and get it registered in another state. This property you cannot enter into another state, which supports my theory that the property never gets unregistered. One, when registered, becomes subject to a single state's jurisdiction, and the other, when registered, becomes subject to the jurisdiction of the several states. So this is only going to be subject to the state of Michigan as it gets registered, and it's lower franchises, the counties, the townships. This one, once registered into the state of Michigan, is subject to only registration fees from the state of Michigan, but the property itself is subject to laws across the entire country because it's a several state jurisdiction. So alright, now I conducted my own property title search while at the county records and the Register of Deeds, and came up with this. Sorry, I'm losing my mouse. I got two screens going on. There we go. So this is the current deed says I am the grantee of this property. This one says my mom was the grantee from the Lockwood development that made the neighborhood. And this one is a Mr. Thomas R. Pugh and Shirley Pugh, husband and wife, that transferred their title to Lockwood. But before doing so, from Thomas R. Pugh and Shirley Pugh, they entered in a land contract with Temple Hills Development Corporation. And there's a few questions to ask about this. And I'm going to bring it up in court, but it raises some concern. This is the back page to that. Now this is the deed that transferred property to the Pugh family from the Hunt family. And here I'm going to start using the magnifier. Hopefully it turns on. There we go. This one is between to the Hunt family from the Walters. Here we have to the Walters from the Demarest family. I know it's hard to read, but this says the south 30 acres of the of the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter and the east 1/2 of the southeast quarter of the northwest 1/4 of section 17 township. And that second part is where the neighborhood lies. Now we have the to the Demarest family from the Asid family. Again, southeast quarter of the northwest quarter. Sorry, east 1/2 of the southeast corner of the northwest quarter. Here we have the transfer. It's still a warranty deed between to the Asid family from the Elliott family. And here we have to the Elliott family from the Albion College Endowment Fund Committee. And I believe this is a 2-pager, yep. And it's still a warranty deed. This is the sheriff's sale. It's a 3-pager. And it is from... It is to the Albion College Endowment Fund Committee from the Buckingham family, and this was a sheriff's sale. So that's why it's handwritten. And here we have to Buckingham from Gannett, Theodore Gannett. And this is the final one. This is from the state of Michigan. It does not say, I could not find it saying any type of deed on here whatsoever. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a patent. There it is. This is a patent. This isn't even a deed. So the title of this document is a land patent from the state of Michigan to Mr. Theodore Gannett or Garrett. No, I think it's Gannett. I don't know. Sometimes I keep misspelling this because it's written differently on each page I look at. I think it's Gannett. So this is a patent from the state of Michigan. The date on this, which is going to be important to know. $1859, so prior to the Civil War. 1859. And here's the breakdown of everything. The names may be a little misspelled, but for the most part, you get it. So I got it from my mother. My mother got it from the Lockwood Development. Lockwood Development got it from Pew. Pew got it from Hunt. Hunt from Walters. Walters from Demarest. Demarest from Sid. Sid from Elliott. Elliott from the College Fund. College Fund from Buckingham. Buckingham from Gannett. Gannett from the state of Michigan. This one, land patent. And I even believe this one was, it didn't say, it was just a land grant. It didn't say deed or patent. I could be wrong. I might need to look at that closer. And then this one was a sheriff's sale. And then I believe the rest after that were deeds. I'll explain why it's important later. So here is your stack of documents you would get if you would do the entire title search history of this property that I'm supposed to be the owner of. The chain of custody, also known as the title abstract. Now, in addition to Lockwood, the development company, giving the title to my mother, they also gave title of the land to other people that crossed through the same land. One is the this is the Bell Telephone Company. Over here we have Board of Water and Light. And over here at this time, I don't think this company exists anymore, but Diamond Broadcasters, back in '81, so it's probably just some cheap, some cable company from back in the day. Now AT&T might have one, or whoever. Consumers is also not on here. They're our gas company that serves us here, so they must have one. And Delhi Township has sewer drain pipes in here, so do they have their own deed of some type of document? That's a question to raise in court. So this is just to show that you're not the sole owner, and I'm using owner with air quotes, of the property. There are multiple other organizations that hold title to that land as well. That's why your gas line gets checked. Your water and electric gets checked by the company. They come onto your land and read the meters, and there's more to mention about that in court. I'm not going to bother with it here. So Martin Newman is going to be next on the stand, who I'm going to question about this whole titling process. I've had a few conversations with him, but I think it's time to put some words on record. Now here I have 3 interviews I did with some local legal professionals. I didn't include their name because their testimony is just used as general information. This person here, this local realtor, happens to be not only realtor but the librarian of my kids' school, and I don't want to impact their career or anything they have because of this case. So I'd rather just keep them anonymous, but they may mention their name on this recording and I tell them it's a recording, but it's not to try them for anything. It's just to get some general information from local professionals so I can get an understanding and so the jury can have a better understanding of what's going on. This one down here with the local trust attorney is an interview I did, and I set it up so as to be like I was prospecting to get a trust, just because I feel like I'm going to get a good amount of information if I'm looking to get a trust. And honestly, I may get a trust in the future. So this was good information for me, and I'm going to share it with the court.
Hello, this is Tabitha.
Stop.
Hi, this is Doug Austin returning your call.
Oh, hi, Doug.
Asked if they were all yours biologically.
Yeah, and the oldest, well, 3 of them are biologically mine. The oldest is mine.
Alright, so on this slide, as you can see, I am now at the Michigan State Law Library. Frequent here quite a bit. There's a lot of information that's not online that you have to get to turn in some pages to find out. So this is one of the books I looked through. I had found a guide on basically trust planning, and in here on this volume, this page number's not here, but it is talking about trusts and Section D, subsection 13.15, about registration. And I think this information right here helps get a greater understanding of what happens when something gets registered at the registration of deeds, register of deeds at the county courthouse. And trusts are also registered at the registry of deeds. This graphic is just to help explain to the jury how trusts are set up, and I'm going to show how that is similar to what I'm talking about. And I want to preface this a little bit. Here I'm going to talk about kind of like the history of how trust came to be. But I do use a lot of Wikipedia sources if it has to do with some definitions and certain events that have happened. Because if I keep using a same source, it makes it easier for the jury or anybody to understand what type of document they're looking at if they already know what to look at. If I brought up 30 other resources on 30 different subjects, it's going to get more and more confusing and hard to know where we're looking at to understand things. So I do use Wikipedia. It's well cited. You can check where it's getting its information from. And when you're trying to get a lot of information very quickly, like I did, this is a great resource to have. And I'm open to any challenge on anything that I cite from Wikipedia or any of my stuff in court. So, let's talk about the relationship between trustee, beneficiary. And in the Middle Ages, this is kind of more what I wanted to get a hold of. So the law of trust first developed in the 12th century from the time of the Crusades under the jurisdiction of the King of England. The common law regarded property as an indivisible entity. It had been done through Roman law and the continental version of civil law, where it seemed inequitable or unfair to let someone with legal title hold on to it. The king's representative, the Lord Chancellor, who established the courts of chancery, which handles equity, had the discretion to declare that the real owner in equity was another person. When a landowner left England to fight in the Crusades, he conveyed ownership of his land in his absence to manage the estates and pay and receive feudal dues. So, the way they describe who is a beneficiary, saying that the beneficiary was the crusader that left the property, I don't agree with. When there is someone higher benefiting from that property, that can take that property from the individual at any time, which would be the king, whoever the main sovereign is, or the Catholic Church at that time, you know. They were the beneficiaries because they didn't even have to use the land. They were still receiving their feudal dues from whoever was there. I believe they are the beneficiary. And whether the crusader or whoever he emplaced there to handle his property while he was gone, they were the trustees. And the minute he transferred his responsibilities to somebody else, that crusader became the trustor. He created that new arrangement that had a time limit so that when he came back, he regained his trustee position. I believe that this is very similar to how we're operating things today. And this is feudalism. On this side, we got a article from New York Real Estate. Yeah, there we go. New York Real Property Law Journal, spring 2019, so pretty recent. Just want to mention this. It's called The Dirt on Trust Ownership of Real Estate. Unlike revocable trust, transfers of property to an irrevocable trust are deemed completed when the transfer is made. Tax savings and other benefits can be achieved through different types of irrevocable trusts. Now, why do I highlight this? Because I think that situation we put ourselves in now with land ownership is an irrevocable trust. My mother cannot go back and undo the deed that me and her agreed on right now. It's irrevocable. Unless something was illegally done or there was a problem with the chain of custody or something. But then that would fall more on me to challenge, not her anymore. LLCs, limited liability companies. Since this was enacted in 1994, LLCs have become a common way to own real estate, especially what are typically referred to as single-purpose entity. An LLC formed solely to own a single piece of real estate, although the law limits the personal liability. And I believe this was done, in my case, as a way to save on taxes. So we'll explore that. Other here say whether lifetime or testamentary. The title company also needs to confirm that the instrument created the trust gives the trustee the power to acquire and convey real estate without restriction, or if it is silent as to the power that the law governing. So, does the trustee or does the grantee on a deed have the power to acquire and convey real estate without restriction? Yeah, pretty much. But we're talking about trust here. You see how it very similar to a deed. Alright, so why this concerns me, this is my family up here. We're standing in the Michigan State Supreme Court building, up on the 5th or 6th floor, looking back at the Capitol. I try to teach my kids as much of this, but they're still very young and impressionable. I think it's very important that they learn law and understand what's going on so that they understand how to make contracts or what they are legally expected to do and what their lawful protections are. And there's stuff that we can do that I think needs to get fixed in the public school system. If we're going to pay for these schools and the curriculum is sidestepping a lot of important stuff, and it's leading the society and culture back down into a lower state of feudalism again, we need to re-educate the youth to help get us back out of it. This is a picture of the platoon I used to have in the U.S. Army Reserves, and they're giving a class on something. But I also sit down all these guys and give them classes about law and about, subjects that aren't typically covered in military training, because it's good to see men in uniform who think similarly and also have a concern. Even comes to Second Amendment and First Amendment and other constitutional problems. We understand when constitutional laws are being violated, and we take that very seriously. Why? Because when we form a contract with the U.S. military, like I did here back in 2002, this is the way military writes their dates, years first. I had an oath right here. I, Derek Brandon Soroka, do solemnly swear to affirm all that right there. I'll read it out loud in court. Not here. I'm not trying to enter into a new contract. And signed. This is a contract. This is a service contract with a branch of the federal government, the executive department. And again, on a further back page, in a regular component of the Armed Forces, that's my oath. This is my oath of my office. And after 6 years, almost 7 years of service, I became a non-commissioned officer. These are your sergeants. So in here I'm going to talk about what this means, the importance of this, and what it means to be this compared to just some new recruit. And there's big emphasis on this. I just want to show that this is the main soldier's creed. This is what they have to memorize, what they learn to live by. And right here, a lot of people don't understand is that we serve the people. We don't just serve the government. We work in the government in order to serve the people, and it's for their rights. Alright, so after I received title to the property at the end of 2016, by the summer of the following year in 2017, I had received this zone ordinance violation ticket on my front door, and I addressed these concerns with the person who wrote the ticket, Officer Dennis Larner, who's a zone ordinance officer, and tried to explain to him the situation. He complained that I had unlicensed boat trailer on my backyard, and I had some junk items. It was a potato box and a mailbox that was destroyed from plows, and I think one other piece of wood furniture that was next to my house, so waiting to go out to the dump as soon as I could afford for a trash truck to come pick it up. And here they typed up their own violation memo from Delhi Township and sent it to me. Same items listed, and then what the code of the zone ordinance is that supposedly I violated. Also, this yard parking one. And so here's my response. I'll give you time to read it. Just pause, read it over. I'm not going to sit here and say to you. Alright, now after that was mailed to Mr. Larner, I wrote that I wasn't going to pay the ticket, and sent that notice to Delhi Township, who then gave me a notice of hearing that they sent to me. So I attended it, and it was an informal hearing with the magistrate. His name is Mark Blummer. It's at the bottom of this page. And what I learned throughout the process of these informal hearings is that it's not being recorded, that they won't let you challenge jurisdiction or challenge the law itself at all. Is basically seems kind of a bullying tactic just to get you to pony up and pay whatever they demand. And I took this pretty offensively. I was professional at the courthouse, though. But after 2 hearings of them seeming like they knew they could get away with talking to me however they wanted, and the magistrate I told him that I'd rather this be a formal hearing from now on record. And I was ready to go to trial. And he tried to talk me out of it by saying, well, it's going to be very expensive for you and all this, assuming that I would have to pay an attorney or whatever. And so I filed paperwork into this case. I didn't think the hearings were doing any good for me. Of course, this was after this as well. And after the hearings, I did fix a couple things that were with the property, because if it truly was my neighbors complaining about the condition of my property and how it's going to affect their property values or whatever, I did take care of the trash that was on the side. It wasn't really trash, it was pieces of wood. And I dismantled 2 of my flower gardens up front so that I could build a parking spot out back for my boat trailer and boat, just so it was up off the grass. So it had cinder blocks and rocks and sawdust, cedar chips and all that put in it now. So I did all that, but then the zone ordinance officer still said, well, your boat trailer's still not registered. And I said, well, I don't want to register it. I'm not even using it on the road right now. And so they said, well, you didn't follow through your orders. And then there was a hearing that I missed for some kind of miscommunication. And so the magistrate entered in this default judgment, saying that if I don't fix the property immediately, it was going to get towed away at my expense. The boat trailer towed away at my expense for not registering the trailer. So I felt this was a huge, gross trespass on me and my rights. So I went for this appeal to this default judgment. This is the default judgment right here that the same magistrate put in. And that was in September. And then I had to pay a bond of $185 because of the hearing I missed. just to keep the case open, and I tried to appeal it. He denied. So my only option was then to go to actual trial, where I could use my constitutional rights to battle this problem. So I filed under special appearance on my appearance form. I answered the civil complaint with the SCAO form for the answer, stating that I didn't consent to these rules, and that there was no subjection to the township's authority, no personal jurisdiction. This is by October 17. Okay, and you can look these forms over. I ordered, this was the attorney for the zone officer right here, David Orvor, and I ordered this granted, that the township stay off my land and property. Don't write me any more tickets. I'm not contracted with the state of Michigan in civil law. So, and this is already after I've made steps to uncontract myself with the state of Michigan, because it's not instant, and I'll explain that in a minute. I had to create my own signature line, write defendant here, so that I could authorize this, because if I just submit this and wait for a judge to sign it, they can just deny it and not sign it. So this needs the authority of me to sign it, since I'm not giving authority to this person to sign it. So this is an order under my authority. Order to release funds. What they charged me, I'm ordering them to pay it back. And again, I authorized it. And then dismissing the case. I put it in. I put order to dismiss with prejudice after the funds have been recovered by me. And again, I authorized it. And now all of a sudden, the attorney for the zone officer says the ticket was issued to me, and then suddenly he's been advised that the property has been remedied and all that. Well, the boat trailer is still not registered, so that never got quote-unquote remedied. And now here's the judge's order, Judge Allen Jr. He's nullifying, the other attorney's nullifying the prosecution. This never got resolved for them. I don't know why it says crime, so it wasn't a crime. And the judge approved it. And I got my money back. Refunded. Check number 185. This is just the payment history throughout the whole thing on the different actions that were taken. Alright, so now this leads up to the property tax. Now, I try to inform them that I'm still not party to the state of Michigan, so if they're trying to apply civil law to me, you're going to have jurisdictional problems. So here's the winter bill for 2016. As I said, this is when my mother transferred the property to me, and we agreed that she would pay the last bill for that year. And then after that is when I would take over. Now, I made this agreement thinking that I had full title to the property, and if there was any problems, I could use my constitutional rights in order to protect myself with this property. Now, this is 2017, so this is during the time of the other case that's happening. And here in August 23rd, 2017, license canceled, subject voluntarily surrendered license. Okay? That's why this on my driver's license stamped void. I submitted it back in. I was done. So no driver's license. I requested the judge's oath after dealing with the magistrate in the previous case, and this is on September, so this is still before the other case was closed, to see if they were even bound by the U.S. Constitution, if they have a written oath of office. As I showed earlier, I had one with the federal government. So I expect them to have one too, especially since it's listed in the Section 35, I believe, of the Judiciary Act of 1790 that created the judicial branch, that all judges in all states will have a sworn oath of office registered with their county. So I requested all judges' oaths of office within Ingham County, and the office at the Ingham County Clerk's office responded, and this is the only one that came up. And this was done in 2013, and this person, as far as I could tell, was not even serving the bench anymore in the county. So that grew great concern for me, even going to trial and expecting the judge there to abide by my constitutional rights. Here's a winter 2017 tax bill, which I still haven't paid. And I informed Delhi now. Now this is December 28, 2017, so this is after the other case closed. So I let them know, and I'll give you a chance to read this. I cited the case number and everything, stating that I prove that you guys do not have personal jurisdiction over me to apply your laws. So this action needs to cease. And I told them I would charge them $5,000 if they opened up a case against me and any other damages I may incur as a result of their actions, because it was getting to the point of harassment and negligence. If they're going to keep threatening me and sending bills to me when I believed they didn't have jurisdiction. So now summer 2018 bill rolls around, still haven't paid it. I am continuing my efforts of disconnecting myself with the state of Michigan. So I did have my own company, my LLC, that was registered with the Licensing Regulatory Affairs of state of Michigan. I unregistered my company, so I'm not using their quote-unquote benefits any longer. So I paid that, unregistered it. It still has a federal tax ID number, it's just not registered with the state of Michigan. I now received a notice of forfeiture for the taxes unpaid for 2017. And this date is coming up, but I got granted an extension, which is stated later. Now I'm sending a response to that notice of forfeiture, so I'll give you time to read that. Again, I'm citing the case number at the 55th District Courthouse. Gave them the date. And basically telling them you don't have jurisdiction. I even told them here I only retain a federal jurisdiction. I sent them copies. I know they're kind of hard to see here. I can try to zoom in a little bit. They're still kind of hard to see, but these are the court documents that I already showed you. I'm just showing that I sent them as well to the Ingham County Clerk's office, which is Barb Byram. She then forwarded them to Eric Schertzing, who's the Ingham County Treasurer, to which he responded, "This property entered foreclosure according to Public Act 123 of 1999 that this office administers. It is unclear to me what, if any, actionable request is contained in the forwarded email. Thank you." So I don't even know if he read the first page. But at this point, Eric could have told me that we don't sue you, so it's not personal jurisdiction. we sue the property, it's in rem jurisdiction. Maybe he doesn't understand that, but it would have been great if he could have offered me a little more information at that point. And this was April 1st, 2019 is when I printed this. I don't know if that's the day I sent it. It probably was. Let me go back real quick and see if I can get a date on this. Oops. So I sent them the forfeiture thing February 28, 2019. And it looks like it was forwarded March 1st, 2019. And then I must have printed it on April 1st. So, the Ingham County Treasurer has now scheduled a pre-publication hearing for me, September 18, 2019, in regards to the property. This is actually not a court summons. This is kind of like attached to a bill, property tax bill. So this brought concern to me. Why am I not receiving an actual court summons from the court itself? How do I know this has been approved by a judge to send me to court? It's not coming from the court. This is coming from the treasurer's office. But I went anyways, talked with them, and I'll explain what happened later. Show cause hearing was Wednesday, February 5th, 2020. At this point in time is when I had to sit down with the treasurer for the second time and his attorney, Mr. Lawler. And that's when they notified me that this was going to be in rem jurisdiction, that they were going to sue the property, not me. February 5th, 2020. And these are further tax bills I've received since, which is still, I'm not paid. And at this time, I'm going to call the Ingham County Treasurer Eric Schertzing up to the stand so I can do some direct questioning with him. This will conclude disc 1, and there's going to be a couple more discs in this series that I should have done soon. Thank you.